Welcome to this deep dive. We're continuing our series trying to make sense of the MPEP, the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure.
Right. Big document.
Huge. And today we're focusing on one really specific but super important part, Chapter 2100, Section 2120. It's titled Patentability.
In this section, 2120, it really gets to the heart of a major hurdle for getting a patent rejection based on prior art. So what came before your invention?
Exactly. Under the main statutes, 35 U.S.C. Section 102 and 103, this is basically how examiners decide if your idea is, well, truly new or just an obvious next step.
It lays out the rules of engagement, you could say.
Yeah.
How examiners should use prior art, the difference between something being anticipated versus obvious, handling abstracts, foreign documents.
And even how they investigate things like public use. So, yeah, pretty critical stuff.
Definitely. So Chapter 2100 is the big picture on patentability, but 2120 is where we see how prior art specifically blocks patents. It's all about Sections 102 and 103.
Okay, so let's dive in. The first point seems to be about using the best prior art available. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it means the examiner should really target the rejection with the most relevant reference they have, the one that hits closest to home for the claims.
So, not just throwing everything at the wall.
Right. And there's a nuance here. Let's say an examiner finds a reference that looks like it anticipates the invention a direct hit under Section 102.
Okay.
But maybe, just maybe, the applicant could potentially disqualify that reference using, say, a 1.130 affidavit, maybe arguing an AIA exception applies.
So there's a potential way around it for the applicant.
Yes, exactly. So the MPEP encourages the examiner in that kind of situation to maybe also include a backup rejection.
A backup? Like what?
Like an obviousness rejection, perhaps using a different part of that same document, or maybe combining it with something else.
Yeah.
The idea is to have a solid alternative if the main rejection gets overcome.
Makes sense. Efficiency, but also thoroughness.
But, crucially, they're told to avoid duplicative rejections. Making the same point over and over with slightly different references, that doesn't really help anyone.
Right. Focus on the core issue. Okay, what about this point on abstracts and foreign documents? That sounds like a potential pitfall.
Oh, it absolutely can be. The MPEP specifically warns against relying only on an English abstract of a foreign patent or a technical paper.
Why is that? Isn't the abstract supposed to summarize it?
It is, but think of it like a movie trailer versus the full movie. The abstract might give you the gist, but it can miss crucial details.
Or worse.
Or worse, it could be misleading, especially with translations, nuances get lost. The full document, properly translated, might show something completely different.
Like maybe the abstract suggests the invention is obvious.
But the full text actually anticipates it. A 102 rejection instead of 103. Or it could go the other way. The full text might teach away from the invention, which would actually help the applicant argue against obviousness.
Wow, okay. So the takeaway is don't judge a foreign reference by its abstract.
Pretty much. You need the full text, ideally translated, to make a proper call. Relying only on the abstract is risky for both the examiner and the applicant responding to it.
Got it. So that leads us nicely into the big one. The difference between anticipation under Section 102 and obviousness under Section 103. Can we break that down simply?
Let's try. Anticipation Section 102 is very strict. It means every single element, every limitation in your patent claim must be found in one single piece of prior art.
Every single bit, explicitly or implicitly.
Explicitly or inherently, yes. But all in that one reference. Think of it like finding an exact blueprint of your invention already published.
Okay. One reference covers everything. That seems like a high bar.
It is, which is why obviousness under Section 103 is often more common.
So how does obviousness differ? It sounds like it allows for more interpretation.
It does. Obviousness allows the examiner to combine teachings from multiple references, or they might take one reference and argue that making a certain modification to it would have been obvious.
Obvious to whom?
Obvious to a person of ordinary skill in the art, basically. A typical worker or researcher in that specific field.
And critically obvious when?
That's key. It has to have been obvious before the invention's effective filing date under the current AIA law, or at the time the invention was made under the older pre-AIA law.
So no using hindsight. You can't just piece it together after the fact because you now know the invention exists.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
There needs to have been some reason, some teaching or suggestion or motivation at that time that would have led that ordinarily skilled person to combine those references or make that modification to arrive at the claimed invention.
Okay, that distinction is crucial. Anticipation. one reference, all elements, obviousness. Combining references or modifying one, but only if it was truly obvious back then.
You got it. That's the core difference.
Now, the section also mentions something called 37 CFR 1.105, a requirement for information. How does that fit in with prior art?
Right, so 1.115 is a tool examiners can use when they need more facts, particularly when the potential prior art isn't a neat patent or publication.
Like what sort of situation?
Think about situations involving, say, a public use of the invention, or maybe an offer for sale, or some other disclosure that happened out in the world, not just in writing, especially if it involves someone other than the inventor.
So things that are harder to just look up.
Exactly. Let's take a pre-AIA example. Maybe there's evidence suggesting the inventor publicly used their invention more than a year before filing. That could be a Section 102B bar, meaning they waited too long.
Okay.
But the examiner might need more details. When exactly did the use start? Was it really public? They can use a 1.105 requirement to ask the applicant for those specific facts.
I see. And under the current AIA law?
Under the AIA, remember there's that 1-year grace period for disclosures by the inventor or someone who learned it from the inventor.
Yeah.
So if an examiner finds a disclosure that happened within that year before filing, they might use 1.105 to ask, was this disclosure by the inventor? Or did it originate from the inventor? Because if so, it might fall under the grace period exception in AIA Section 102B1 and not count as prior art against the application.
So it's basically the examiner saying, okay, I see this potential issue, but I need more information from you, the applicant, to figure out if it actually applies.
Precisely. It's a way to fill in those factual blanks to correctly apply the law, whether it's 102 or 103.
This really highlights how important understanding all these nuances in Section 2120 is, not just for the examiners, but definitely for applicants trying to get their patents.
Absolutely. You need to understand how your invention is going to be judged against the prior art, what counts, what doesn't, and how to respond if a rejection comes. It requires real factual grounding and legal precision.
Yeah, whether you're arguing against anticipation or obviousness or dealing with one of these 1.105 requests, knowing these MPEP guidelines is fundamental.
And it's a constantly moving target, isn't it? Prior art never stops growing. New papers, new products, new disclosures happen every day.
Which means staying sharp on these principles is just part of the ongoing process.
Definitely.
So if you want to really get into the weeds on this, the official MPEP itself is available online from the USPTO. That's the authoritative source.
And of course, working with qualified patent instructors or registered patent practitioners is always recommended for navigating these complexities. They live and breathe this stuff.
Indeed. And on that note, we should give a special thanks to Mike Shepard, who was the creative director behind putting this whole MPEP audio series together.
Yeah, his vision really helped make this project happen. Just remember, everyone, this summary was put together using AI tools.
Right. It's for education purposes, general information. It might have errors. It's definitely not legal advice.
For the official word, always go back to the MPEP itself or consult with a professional.